I finished reading 3 books
Yeah?
in the last week and a half. Finished Crime and Punishment last week, which we talked about. I went and read that Starlight Pulp Review issue 5, which is like almost 300 pages. Knocked that out in a few days. And then I tackled William Faulkner's As I Lay Dying. And I read that in 2 days.
And that's supposed to be like really difficult.
Yeah, it's supposed to be one of the most challenging books ever written. There's a lot of gobbledygook. It was all right. The story's kind of interesting. You got a bunch of poor dirt farmers. I don't think they're actually dirt farmers, but a bunch of poor Mississippians or whatever the fuck they are. The mom dies, and then they have to go on an odyssey because she was a selfish asshole. It's like, oh, I don't want to be buried, here where I live with my family. I want to be buried where I came from, Jefferson, 40 miles away. But by horse, it's 20 days. It's some fucking ridiculous journey. And then what unfolds is an odyssey where this down on their luck family full of assholes and mentally ill people go across the state to go to the Jefferson to bury the dead lady. And there's a flood, and they have to cross a river, and the one guy breaks his leg that was already broken. And then they get cement to make a cast. They just cement his leg, and that fucking turns it black. And then the lady starts rotting, and she stinks, and everyone in town's like, ew, get it out of here.
When was this written?
I don't know, 1920s maybe. It's yucky. Yeah, the lady starts rotting and stinking. And then the one lady, the daughter, she apparently wants to get an abortion. So she's going around sneaking behind her family's back, trying to find a doctor that'll do it. And she finds this creepy guy who's like, oh, I got a way to do it. You give me $10 and I'll give you some medicine. And the medicine was just talcum powder and pills. And then he was like, you come into the cellar and I got this hose. What we'll do is we'll get rid of it the same way you made it, is what I think he says. And it doesn't show that, thankfully, but I think some bad stuff just happens there. Yeah, overall, it's weird. It's 59 chapters, and every chapter is a different character's perspective. Now, some of it goes back to, the characters reoccurring. But, like, the one character is slowly going insane. The whole book is stream of consciousness. You even get one part where it's the point of view of the dead lady. Her stream of consciousness, and it's like, she's dead, though. And also, originally, Faulkner decided, because each chapter has the name of the person that's talking. Originally, he didn't do that. He didn't have the name, so you wouldn't know who was talking. And also, every chapter is just a scene dropped on your head. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I liked it. It was dumb.
Do you think it deserves the acclaim and
No, not at all. Fucking no. But it, as somebody stated in I think a review I read, is a black hole of a book. Even though it's very short, it's very dense. Not so much the language, though. I sent you a page, just a random page. Like, this is how the whole thing's written. You're like, gobbledygook. But it is experimental. The thing is, it's not just straight stream of consciousness like you would think, because William Faulkner inserts himself all the time. These are country bumpkins. They're not using these giant fucking words that you never heard before. And like the one character uses them all the time in his parts, and it's like, but that's not actually how he thinks. But I did some research, and apparently what Faulkner did was, it was supposed to be like say, okay, you have your orange Gatorade there. I look at your orange Gatorade, and I know it's an orange Gatorade, but I don't necessarily create the words in my head that says orange Gatorade. So that's what Faulkner is doing, is like when you like scenery or something, character sees it and it's like, why is this so descriptive? Like, this person's a dumb fucking idiot. They don't know these words. It's because it's not supposed to actually be words. It's just like what they're seeing. So that's when Faulkner inserts himself to use the fancy words to describe something, but it would be instantaneous as the person saw it. So it's thinking without words, basically. And that sounds as convoluted and as fucking dumb as I made it sound. Yeah, it's a very confusing book. I can see people not liking that at all. At all, by the way, is spelled A-T-A-L-L. It was in the book a lot. Because every character was saying, oh, that ain't nothing at all.
Yeah.
And there's a Dern. Dern was another one. I think it was D-U-R-N. Was said a lot. But it was funny. There was a lot of funny stuff, like the fucking old lady in the casket floating down the river, and a bunch of mules. They drowned and they're flipping.
And you've read other Faulkner, right?
Sound and the Fury. Sound and the Fury I thought was excellent. This one, which is supposed to be his, I don't know if it's his magnum opus, but it's the one everyone says is the best. Yeah, it's not. I am going to watch tonight the James Franco movie he made.
Oh.
Apparently this one's good. The Sound and the Fury, they said, wasn't good. He plays the mentally ill guy. And yeah, it's James Franco. And you're like, oh, it's not much different than how he is normally.
Right.
But As I Lay Dying, apparently is actually very well made, from what I understand. Though I don't think this one James Franco directed by himself. He might have had help. What else, Spencer? Oh, the big news.
Big news.
You know what I started reading last night?
I was gonna ask you what was next on the docket.
I want you to take a guess.
Me?
Yeah, it's a challenging work. Some might say one of the most challenging works.
You didn't start Jerusalem again, did you?
No, I already read that. No, this is much harder than Jerusalem.
Oh, my.
I started Ulysses by James Joyce.
Oh, okay.
I'm still on the introduction, which is like 50 pages. But I have to read it or else I'm not going to know how to read the book. Also, I took screenshots of this because there's articles on how to read Ulysses.
That's
that
never,
kind of book.
That's never a good sign.
Yeah, but this one was kind of helpful. So they're not chapters, they go into episodes.
Okay.
So James Joyce writes it. It's just these little things I could keep in mind when I'm reading. So episode 1, normal novel. So the first chapter is a normal novel. Good start. Episode 2, an informal catechism. Don't know what that means, so not so good already. Episode 3, elitist masculine monologue. So I think the whole chapter is a monologue. Episode 4, poking fun at great historic figures. Episode 5, the hypnotic nature of religion. Episode 6, death. That'll be a cheery one. This whole thing's a comedy, by the way. Episode 7, making fun of journalism. It's written like a newspaper. Pay attention to the headlines. Episode 8, food puns. Everything can be eaten and everything eats in this chapter. Episode 9, making fun of Hamlet and elitists who debate over obscure pieces of literature. In particular, making fun of certain scholars who would later analyze Ulysses. Breaking the fourth wall a little, I think. Episode 10, the chapter has nothing to do with the main characters. It is instead presented as a series of short stories surrounding the side characters. The humor is that it is in fact largely pointless and that most of the side characters make fun of the main characters. Episode 11, everything is a music pun. A lot of onomatopoeia is used. Music pun. You know how much I love those.
Especially in reading.
Yeah. Oh, fuck. Episode 12, there are 2 narrators. One is hyper-colloquial to the point of not making sense, and one is hyper-scientific to the point of not making sense. The competition between the narrators produces the comedy. I'm almost done. Episode 13, narrated by a young girl and everything is a sex joke. Episode 14, an elaborate parody of all the great English authors. 15, written as a hallucinatory play in a red light district. I like that. 16, this chapter is very ambiguous, and the comedy comes from mistaking characters for other characters. Purposely frustrating. 17, written as a catechism, the comedy comes from the hyper-scientific question and answer format being applied to the mundane. 18, streaming consciousness of Bloom's wife.
And how big of a book is this?
It is large. I don't know, 500, 600 pages. It looks pretty thick. It's girthy. The one I'm reading, because I have all these editions. I went with just the regular edition I had for now, because they said before you read the one that has all the explanations and everything, just read it regular. So all right, that's what I'll do, but the font is so small.
I'm saying this is still like a holdout from a couple years ago, right? Whenever you tried to do your big old book challenge, right?
Yeah, I read everything that you're supposed to read leading up to it, and I just didn't read it.
To the point now you've probably forgotten everything that you've read.
I don't think it's going to matter. After reading that, but that helps because then I keep in mind, it's like, oh, this chapter's supposed to be about food. Yeah. Maybe that'll help make some sense, but I'm not holding out hope that it's going to be good.
No.
Nah, I don't know. I'd like to enjoy it, but I don't know if I'm smart enough. Regardless, we are going to be diving into some more book talk today. This was Spencer's idea because he loves Native Son by Richard Wright, his favorite novel of all time.
No, but it was good.
Oh, not your favorite novel of all time. Why? Why not? Why not? No.
I don't know.
I'm trying to catch you.
Yeah.
Trying to make you seem like a piece of shit.
Yeah, well, I mean.
Yeah, we'll try.
You don't need to catch me to do that. They just have to listen to past episodes.
That's true. All right, we'll be back in a moment. are listening to the Drunken Pen Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Caleb James. With me, as always, Spencer, the Chicago crackhead charmer church.
Oh.
Yeah. Charming them. I don't know if that's fitting to the episode, but the setting is Chicago.
Yeah.
1930. The setting of Native Son by Richard Wright is Chicago 1930. Protagonist, Bigger Thomas. And this book was a doozy.
Yeah.
I don't want to break down the whole plot, but basically, Bigger Thomas is a result of his environment. 1930, Chicago was not kind to African Americans or women or anyone that wasn't a white man. And even then, looming overhead was the Great Depression. So nobody had a good time, really. This was, 30 some odd years pre-civil rights movement. So what we have is basically a look into Chicago where all the poor black people are segregated to one side of town.
Yeah.
Basically what I remember. It's been years since I read this, 10, 15 years ago. But I recommended it to you, and you finally went and read it. So you're a little more freshened up than I am. But the book starts with Bigger Thomas, his family. I think his brother's Buddy. His ma is just Ma. And they all live in one-room apartment.
There's a sister, too.
A sister as well, and they just live in one-room apartment. So you get right off the bat, Bigger dreams of being not necessarily a better person, but have a better station in life. I think he wants to be an airline pilot. Or just like a fighter pilot. He wants to be a pilot of sorts. Wants to fly planes, I believe. You're supposed to believe that's due to his environment, which obviously comes to play, but he is not a good guy.
No.
He, pretty early on, there's like a fight in a pool hall that he causes, I believe, and he wants to rob a white man's deli, and his buddy Gus, I think there's 3 of them, but his buddy Gus does not want to because that's very risky.
Yeah.
Which is another aspect of this story is the white people are fine if black people rob other black people. They don't give a fuck.
Right, yeah.
Kill them, rob them. They don't really give too much of a shit. But if you rob a white man, that's a problem. So that puts you the state of mind of Bigger Thomas right at the beginning is that he's sick of it, you know?
Well, it does like it kind of brings up that like nature versus nurture kind of thing, like because also like one of the reason he caused that fight is because like he also then himself starts to doubt like the plan and like kind of get himself from out, and because like he's not big enough to be like, yeah, you know what, I'm kind of worried about it too, let's not do it. So instead he starts a fight with his friends that will then be the cause of them not doing the heist. Because
and there's an overarching theme in this whole story about how he hates doubting himself, basically because the way white people view him. And it's about like the white people make him uncomfortable, embarrass him, make him feel lesser than, and that's like the whole thing. So even the plan that he came up with, knowing it's not going to work and it's a bad idea, he can't just say that because then he feels lesser than, so he has to blow it up by causing a knife fight.
Right.
And also what I thought was interesting is that happened an hour before he has an interview for a nice job.
That could literally change his life.
A life-changing job, which he does get. He becomes the driver for the real estate, I don't want to say mogul, but a well-off real estate guy. Like, I think he owns, he's the landlord of the apartment building Bigger lives in, him and his family.
You could probably, just by the, at least for like their side of the community, he's probably more actually a slumlord.
I'm definitely sure it's a slumlord, but that's another,
but he was like not an asshole slumlord.
That's the thing. That's where we get this weird twisting logic. Is he is one of the liberal whites, one of the good quote unquote whites who not understand because they don't, but view the black man's plight as something that they can save. You know, the white savior complex. But then you run a fucking slum, so are you really saving anybody? But he does hire Bigger because he wants to, in his mind, do morally good. The landlord does.
Because like the last like driver or not maid, but like an outfit or whatever,
butler.
But yeah, he was able to like go to like school and he was able to get like a better job someplace else.
So basically, if Bigger plays his cards right, he can elevate his status in life and maybe actually make something of himself. And I believe that guy's name is Mr. Dalton.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Mr. Dalton. And his daughter, what the fuck was her name? Is it Sue? or Mary. I think it's Mary.
Yeah.
I'm going to say his daughter's name's Mary, Dalton. She's a dirty communist. She's hanging out with a bunch of communists. Her boyfriend, Jan.
Jan, yeah.
Jan, the man. He's a dirty communist. And so Bigger gets the job, and things actually start looking like they might be going well. He also still views this whole situation as like, kind of the old house slave mentality. It was like he doesn't want to actually do this, but that's his ticket out of the projects and out of the life he's been living. So he kind of has to take the job, and he's excited. He was actually excited about the job because it's gonna change his life for the better.
Yeah, because not only is he getting room and board there, he's getting paid, but there's it was like $20 like a week or something. Like it was being sent back to his family. So not only is it like helping him, but it'd be helping them out too.
Yeah, so it's just good all around. But as things go in the 1930s for African Americans, immediately everything just goes to shit.
Yeah.
So Bigger takes Mary and her friend out on a night on the town. They smoke and do drugs and drink and have communist parties and all this shit. And Bigger's just the driver, but I don't even think he actually drinks with them. But they want him to, right?
I think maybe a little bit at
I know they embarrass him.
Well, because like they go to they ask she wants to go someplace where the African Americans were and stuff like that, and like there's this one restaurant that he knows, and like he was just gonna ride in the car where they ate, but they forced him to come in, and then so like his friends and people from the neighborhood saw him sitting there with these white people, and like he didn't like that, he didn't and mess with him. Like again, that was like with his nervous, they're actually trying to be nice to him, but since he's been treated so poorly by whites his whole entire life, he can't recognize when they're trying to be nice, and then also just like he still just gets like angry with them because now they forced him into this situation that he didn't want to be in.
Yeah, they just basically embarrass him, and he also feels like kind of like a charity case at times, and then at other times it's just like they don't understand. They think, oh, we're just doing good by you. We're treating you to a meal. You should like it. But if you looked at from his point of view, look at things from his point of view, it's like, no, that's not necessarily what's going on. Like, imagine what the people he knows thinks. Like, why is he hanging out with these white people and what's going on? And so he just feels awkward all the time. We'll skip ahead. So he takes, and here's the big spoiler, he takes Mary back to the house, and she is drunk as a skunk. He carries her up to bed, and then Mary's mom comes in, and she's blind, and just Bigger's disposition and knowing how
being a black man in their daughter's room that late at night,
he immediately just goes into fight or flight mode, and he puts a pillow over her head because he's afraid she's gonna out him as being in the room. The mother finally relinquishes. She must just be drunk. She leaves. Too late. Mary's dead.
Yeah.
He suffocated her, and he's like, oh, fuck. So, making a bad situation worse, instead of confessing to the accident or just leaving, and maybe they would think she just died because she was drunk, suffocated herself. No, he shoves her in the fucking furnace because his other duty in the house is to feed the furnace to make sure it's always hot and they have heat. And he just shoves the corpse in there and burns it up.
And also, it doesn't fit.
No.
So he also...
Choppity-chop.
Yeah. Certain appendage needed to be cut off to fit in.
Yeah, so he chops her up a little bit. And it's very brutal. All these scenes are fucking written in such a way where it's very high tension. And then it's strange because, again, Bigger is not made to be a good guy. But when you read it, you can't help but feel his plight and his insecurities and his worries, and you just feel...
but also then gets super pissed off when you're just like, what the fuck are you doing, man?
You get very conflicted feelings reading this because you understand why he does what he does, but at the same time you know what wrong is, and you can see like, no, here's your way out. Don't do it this way.
But then also you got to factor in the time. Like, it doesn't matter even if he would like did the right way, he'd probably still get in just as much trouble.
Yeah.
So
like, I always thought the best way would just be like somehow maybe wrap a blanket around her head and kind of move her so she looked like she was just like so drunk she wrapped herself up and just fucking leave.
Yeah.
And just maybe these liberal ass parents would just be like, oh no, what happened? You know?
Well, I mean, kind of like that did kind of happen because as the story unfolds and she goes missing, they get investigated and stuff. Their first thing is like, well, what about the black boy?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, he didn't. He had, you know what I mean? We talked to him.
He's
so
there when the reporters and cops are there.
So like they kind of actually do that.
Yeah. But then Bigger goes even more fucking horse's ass, and he tells the cops that he saw Jan, her boyfriend, leaving the house, or he was in her room or something. So he puts the blame on Jan, and then Jan's like, what the fuck, dude?
Yeah, because they're like, because he's like, the only thing they hate more than a black guy is a communist.
Yeah, that was his rationale. And it ends up backfiring because he's still a black guy, and it turns out that's not necessarily true. What ultimately does Bigger in is that there's this really tense scene. It was one of the best scenes I've read tension-wise in anything, where like the cops and reporters are in the basement. I forget why, and they're like,
because they want to do like a press release or something.
Something, yeah. And so far, Bigger is not a suspect, really. Like, they still don't think he did it or anything. They're the casted eye of suspicion is not upon him.
It's still kind of like on Jan,
yeah,
or like some hit the Communist Party.
Yeah. But then they're like, "Hey, Bigger, can you like stoke the clear out some of those ashes? It's getting pretty fucking thick in there. Yeah. We need this fire going or whatever." And he's like, oh, "Okay." And they're all down there, and he's nervous and he's digging, and you get this long scene where he's like, he knows the bones are in there, and he doesn't want them to see. Well, they end up seeing the bones.
Yeah, because he knew like he had to go down there and get them, but he hadn't had a chance.
Yeah.
And then so like with him trying to figure out what to do, and then because when he opens the thing, he does see the bones, but like he keeps it open for so long, the whole garage just like fills up with smoke, and he just fucking dance off.
And again, if he played it cool, he could have fucking reeled back in disgusted surprise, like, what the oh, Jan. Like, if he wanted to be an asshole and blame Jan some more, like, the body, and then maybe he still would have been, but no, he runs off. And then this is where I lost not just respect, but just all ideas of Bigger just being a product of his environment, and maybe just because of what happened to him in his life made him this way. I just lost all that and was just like, no, this is just a bad guy. Yeah. He gets his girlfriend Bessie, and he basically makes her an accomplice by confessing to her and then saying, no, now you have to be with me or you're going to get arrested too.
Well, she's one of the people that see him at the restaurant with them.
Yeah.
And so she's pissed at him to begin with.
Yeah. And then he makes it so she's an accomplice. Then they end up in this fucking abandoned building that's very cold.
Because their idea is, because before they found the ashes, the plan was they were going to try to play it off as like a ransom thing.
Yeah.
And they were going to take the money, and then they were going to split town, but then they found the bones and everything. So now it turns into a manhunt.
Yeah, so the cops are after Bigger. Now they know he did it. And he gets Bessie in this abandoned building.
And he keeps on replaying or trying to think things through, because she has no part of it. No. She rather just like confess and like go to jail or whatever. And he's just like, she's slowing me down, but I can't leave her because she knows know too much.
But this is where he there's no redeeming Bigger Thomas. He becomes just before, like, he accidentally killed the white girl, and even though he started fights and stuff before, he wasn't a murderer. He wasn't a stone cold killer. Well, he rapes Bessie and then bricks her. He hits her in the head with a brick, killing her. He thinks he killed her, and then dumps her down like a dumbwaiter or something alongside the building. Which later you find out she didn't die from that.
No, she ended up freezing to death because of how cold it was.
Jesus fucking Christ! It was horrible. He is on the run, and eventually the cops find him on a roof, and then we have a fun rooftop chase scene. They end up hosing him.
In the middle of winter.
He gets caught, finally. He goes to trial. Strangely enough, Jan's friend is a lawyer, Max, and they try to help Bigger out. So even though Jan, Bigger framed him for murder and also killed his girlfriend, Jan still wants to help him out.
Well, because like we said, and we've talked about this like off air. The weird thing is because Bigger slot was like, oh, well, they hate the commies as much as they hate the black people. Yeah. So, like, in a weird way, they have a very small taste of what Bigger and his like family and his his people have gone through. So like I think that's kind of like why he why they wanted to help.
Yeah,
because they know too what it's kind of like to be the minority being treated like shit by the majority.
Did you feel Richard Wright went out of his way to give a sympathetic view of communist?
A little bit, yeah.
I don't know if he was a communist or if he believed in some of the ideals, but he did make it seem, like you said, that they had a taste of what like black experience was in America. And I don't know if it was just he did it just for that sake, or if he was actually trying to say, because he paints like the communists as like the good guys, kind of.
Yeah, because
they're the only ones willing to help Bigger.
Yeah, because part of the painting Jan as the killer was because they gave him some of these like brochures and stuff like that to like read and stuff like that, and like their thing is just like one of their things was like white, black, everybody's kind of equal.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, I don't know if that was a thing that he just used that story wise, or if he had any actual belief or anything in that.
Well, I'm pretty sure that this book came out in 1940.
Yeah, I think
so. 10 years after the setting, I would assume he wrote it during the Great Depression. So he wrote it pretty much at, the height of the communist thing, I thought was the 50s. Wasn't that when like the McCarthyism, Red Scare stuff was going on? I mean, when was Dalton Trumbo active? Because he was like the whole Hollywood shutdown of the communists. Let me look that up real quick. The Red Scare. It might have been in the 30s, but I could have sworn I know it went for a long time.
Well, I think like communist is like one of those things like it really comes in ebbs and flows of like of how more people believe in it or get behind it. I think because remember they even had a Seinfeld episode about it.
Yeah, I'm wrong. 1970 and the 1920s is when that was really prevalent. So I mean, I know it went on, and they were always worried about communists, but I guess that makes sense because the Russians after World War II, like that was kind of starting to crumble and stuff, but. Yeah, that was like an interesting aspect of the novel is how it went into communism, and it's not such a bad thing. But then if he was just talking about like the equality aspects of it, that would make sense that black people would be for that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I also wanted to mention out too that like what I liked about his writing, at least of with this story, I haven't read anything else of his. He also didn't make every white person a complete
hunk of shit.
Yeah, like, either if it was Jan or Max or even the Daltons, they
were all written like people.
Yeah, and even after the murder of their daughter, they made it a point to like, because Bigger mother was worried about, her and her other two kids getting kicked out and like, don't worry, we're not going to kick you out and, and stuff like that. And so, like, I appreciated that, especially for the time period that it was, because he could have easily just made, like, the Daltons, like, these, like, weird, rich, like, white assholes, like, you know what I mean?
To be fair, he also had to sell books.
Yeah.
In 1940s America, so painting all white people as hunks of shit in this novel that's already controversial because it deals with race relations.
That's a fair point, yeah.
He might not have, he might have just been a smart way to write it. Because I think if you wanted white people to, okay, let's think of the modern MAGA people. If you want them to look at your cause and not sneer and disgust, you can't do that by saying, oh, these racist fucking backwoods hillbilly.
Yeah.
You can't just say they're all hunks of shit and stuff, or they're not going to, why would you listen to, like if one of them was trying to turn you on to their cause, if they called you a liberal homo or something, do you think that's going to make you want to listen to them?
Right.
So I think having a finer touch and not painting everyone of a certain demographic as one thing is a good way to get people on your side. And obviously he did want to sell books, and if you're going to get your message across, you have to do that by being a little more general.
Try to get the biggest audience that you can.
Yeah, and that goes into the final arc of this book is the trial scene, which is, there's two things. One, Richard Wright, through Bigger Thomas, bemoaning religion. Basically, I don't know if this was Richard Wright's actual views on religion, but I don't remember the exact phrasing, but Bigger Thomas tells the priest that basically he doesn't believe in God. There's no afterlife and stuff like that, and it's not necessary.
Well, again, too, I think he was still just so angry that it wouldn't have mattered. He just would have been like being an asshole to anything, whatever it was.
And I don't know if this was just a touch on Richard Wright's part about how like Christianity and the white man's religion were forced on Black Americans even before they were Black Americans, when they were slaves. That could be an aspect of it, but for what I remember, that wasn't a huge part. That was just there was a scene or two with the priest, and then it goes into this very long lecture that's just straight up Richard Wright, I think, by what is it? Not the prosecutor, was it Max, the guy, the lawyer that was defending Bigger?
Well, there was two. There was the prosecutor and they each had their own kind of big monologue about their own side,
which I felt that was the only thing I didn't like about the novel. Not the message in that; it just seemed a little ham-fisted. That it was these giant and
it kind of slowed down.
Yeah,
one of the only negatives I have about the book is because the whole thing it leads to like how like. Bigger kind of doesn't feel like he has a voice. He can express the way he thinks and feels and stuff like that. And like he does it a little bit at like the very end when he's talking to Max after the trial. But like for him not to like, because they give him like he has a chance to speak. And he doesn't.
Yeah.
And like that was only like my only kind of thing is like
I think that was symbolic of just like the whole novel's main theme of the Black people not having a voice.
Yeah.
Even when you get one, you can't talk. Because at the beginning, it actually starts...
I mean, it makes sense and everything. It's just like, oh, man, I would have, like, just after all that, to have that be, like... Even if it wasn't, like... It shouldn't have been as long as either the previous two, but, like I said, like, I felt like if he could have, like, said something.
Yeah. Well, at the beginning, it kind of starts with hope because Bigger is dreaming of his future. Like I said, there's a thing about him wanting to fly airplanes, and I think his buddies make fun of him about that, like wanting to be a pilot. But he actually holds these dreams of the future, and then that's why he takes that job, and he thinks it's going to help him out. And then after all this stuff happens, he loses all that. But then at the end, Max helps him, which is kind of a kick in the dick, I think. He helps him restore that hope, and then it kind of ends with the message of hope, but then Bigger gets the death penalty, so he doesn't have a future, and it's like, well, what the fuck? But because they were going for life in prison, and he's like, no, you can still have a future, and you can still have a life, and you can still do things. And then Bigger believes it, but then he ultimately gets the death penalty, and that's basically like that's what's at the time. That's what's going to happen. They don't give a shit about this kid. He killed a white person. That's all that fucking matters. They didn't even really like. They brought up him killing Bessie and stuff, but it was weird because it was almost like that wasn't as important to them.
No, they only use it as like he killed again.
Yeah, like a character. Oh, he'll keep doing it, like a character thing. But they didn't actually care.
They kept on trying to pin other rapes and murders on him as well.
Yeah, well, they used to do that a lot back then. If they had catch somebody, especially if it was somebody that was actually guilty, they were like, "Well, we could wipe out a whole bunch of paperwork by just saying he did all of them because we don't give a fuck about this guy."
They still try to do that shit now.
Yeah, they do, and I love it. The justice system works great. So I think we can end on, by the way, I probably gave a rating at the beginning. I think I gave this a 4 or 5. I don't remember. So out of whiskey shots, I gave it either a 4 or 5.
Yeah, I'd say about like a 4. Yeah.
It was a really good book. We're going to end on this. The comparison to, which I think this came out maybe before, but Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. You've not read that.
No.
But that is kind of the counter to this book.
I've heard you talk. We've talked about it before.
Yeah, I'd recommend reading that one as well because I like Native Son more just because it was more action-packed and it was more of a thriller at times. Whereas Invisible Man is about a black man, and it might be Chicago or New York. I forget where the setting is. But a major city, and it's basically the same thing. It's like this guy gets a job in a factory or something, or like he's the invisible man. Like white people, unlike Bigger Thomas, who feels lesser than, this guy feels like he's not even seen, so because this guy tries to do the right thing as well, but he's just not seen by society because he's a black man in the 1930s or 40s. And it's a very good look, but it's a good comparison because it gives you the black guy who isn't like a violent, because like where Bigger Thomas is a product of his environment, he's violent and he acts out, he doesn't think things through. This guy, and wish I could remember the protagonist's name, he is more educated and he thinks things through, but still doesn't really matter. And it doesn't have the same ending. I think the Invisible Man ends in like a riot or something, but it still screams the injustice, and the view of Black Americans at the society. So that's definitely worth checking out. But of the two, I like Native Son more.
Yeah.
I felt maybe just because I grew up poor and we went to like the inner city school and all our friends were basically Black growing up, we got probably a closer view to that side than the Invisible Man side.
Even in that, in like the beginning, he talks about how like there's a difference between like blacks and whites, but then there's also like the poor whites that are almost just as, they're still a little bit higher than the blacks, but not by much.
Poor whites in American history have always been something that I thought was strange, in that basically on an economic standpoint could be on the same footing or even lesser than their black counterparts, but in a societal standing, they're still slightly above. A poor white and a poor black at the time walk into a diner, who's going to get seated first?
Right.
It's always like those little nuances. If a cop's coming to town and he's a corrupt cop and he wants to bang some heads and he sees a poor white who's drunk on the street and a poor black who's drunk on the street, who's going to get hit in the head first?
Right.
Who's going to get arrested first? It's always been that, but when it comes to the economic side, no difference. When it comes to the way they live, very similar. And that's why I've been reading like the Faulkners and Cormac McCarthy's books, because they paint pictures, usually it's in the South, of Southern blacks and Southern whites who are on the same station, and it's very similar how they live. And it's weird because they intermingle as equals, but only when you get those outside, like such as the cops or government officials or something. Only when you get those outsiders coming in does that dynamic change a little. And then you see, oh, blacks are still lesser than always for some reason. Even now in society, if you have a drunk white guy and a drunk black guy in the street, who's the cop more likely to catch? I don't know why that has to be like that, but that has not changed very much since the 1920s and 30s. But anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed Native Son. It made me very mad at times, like it was supposed to. It evokes a lot of emotion to the reader.
Like I was reading it towards the end of the year, so like it's just like as I'm reading, it's just like a lot of let's go.
Now I would be interested to see like a very racist person's point of view reading it.
I don't know if they'd be even like.
Well, let's say they were, because there are some educated racists. But that always scares me. That's more like a poor fucking backwoods redneck racist.
Right.
You can like almost forgive that. Not the acts or the way they behave, but just the fact that they're product of their environment.
Yeah.
But when you have fucking Yale educated JD Vance style racist or something, you're just like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, you know better. That's the thing. When you know better and you believe the whites are the superior races, it's like, no, you should be fucking shot in the street, you piece of shit. But anyway, I'd be interested in one of those kind of people, or even just a poor redneck, but they probably don't read. But read that book and just see like how they view it. I bet you they would be a lot harsher.
You know who I want to read this book? He probably has, because he seems like a fucking smarmy asshole, but Ben Shapiro.
I want Ben Shapiro to read Native Son. He probably has a review on it somewhere where he talks about Bigger Tom as if he had just some bigger bootstraps.
Yeah.
And, he's a fucking... Yeah, there's a lot of fuckheads. So that is our not so shoddy review. I think we did better than we did sometimes.
I don't think that was pretty
For
good.
not having read it in 15 years, and we tried...
I thought it had only been a few years. I didn't... Because like... I thought like... Because that would have been before the podcast, right?
Yeah, so that had to be at least 10 years ago. 2016, 2015, I think I read it maybe. But we tried to watch a couple like summaries or documentaries, because normally when we watch one of these, we want to see what we missed, especially if it's something I haven't read in a while. So I like to watch different, like Crime and Punishment. I watched all kinds of things on it after. Native Son's only reviews.
Yeah.
On YouTube, I could only find reviews, and then even like we watched a 5-minute documentary, and it was still I think
there was just somebody reading some.
It was a summary
off of Wikipedia.
Yeah, it was like a summary. It wasn't. I didn't really see any videos talking about the themes or like even the writing style so much.
No, maybe like if we would have watched some of those reviews, they would have maybe gotten into it.
But all the ones I saw were spoiler free, which is annoying because I get it. It's a spoiler free, but it's like almost 100-year-old book, and if you don't spoil this kind of book, you can't talk about the deeper implications brought up in the book. So I think this was a required spoiler.
I think almost like spoiling the book might help, like, Because like I remember before when you would tell me about the book, I'm like, oh, that seems interesting. But then when you're like, he fucking kills her, cuts her head off, and puts her in a furnace, I'm like, that sounds like a book I want to read.
It sells it. If it's just like it's a book about injustice, Spencer,
Yeah, it's probably good, but
yeah, I put it on the pile. So anyway, if you like this episode, I do not know when we'll do another book review.
Probably not for a while with that thing you're working on.
Oh yeah, Ulysses. That might be. If you read it too, we could.
Fuck you.
Could review.
Yeah, because like the last big book, Dante's Inferno, we haven't done.
You want to do Dante's Inferno finally? See, now Dante's Inferno, I found so many cool videos on.
Yeah.
So many videos that were better than the book. If you want to follow us, we are on the internet at DPW Podcast, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. I think that's it. You can follow me at CalebJamesK.com, where I'm hoping to update my publication history soon. I still have not received word on anything, but you're Spencer. So what are you? You're the Chicago crackhead charmer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have like a little flute and you're like,
and then
the
like
crackheads are swirling up and dancing?
Well, so I have to throw like a little over my shoulder just then, and then because what I do, I'm trying to get them into like the centers, and I'm like
that's cool,
charming them into the rehab places,
doing the Lord's work.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for listening. We will check you out next week with an episode about
maybe the monkey. No, that would be the week after.
That'd be the week after. The Monkey, Stephen King's book to movie, The Monkey, story to movie.
Yeah, it's just a short story.
Yeah, so
maybe in the future, maybe for that.
Maybe we'll do a quick DBS review on that.